Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And Jody Lynn, you know as well as I do, because you've been with me on the show now for about a year, and you were also a guest originally when you came on. You know as well as I do, when I bring guests onto the show, I don't pre-plan them in terms of, well, what do they have to offer, and does it fit the flow of what we've been talking? It's just, whatever comes on, right? Mm-hmm. But the amazing thing that happens, and we've seen this time and time again, is how when a guest comes onto the show, it dovetails perfectly with something going on in one of our lives, something that has been a theme on the show. So it's the law of attraction playing out in kind of a group sense in that way.
Mm-hmm. And divine timing.
Divine timing, yeah, the whole deal, right? And here we are doing it once again because, as you know, as listeners know, I was divorced in February after 23 years. And I've got most of the things that I've been wanting to ironed out. But the one that I'm still looking for is that romantic mate. And what do we have today? We have a guest who specializes in helping people to find love again. I mean, that's perfect dovetail. It's absolutely fabulous. I love it. So this is going to be good stuff. So Marilyn Penny, thank you for joining us today. Where are you connecting from, Marilyn? I didn't even ask you.
Yes. Hi, Walt. Hi, Jody Lynn. Thanks for having me on. I am in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, we got another Canadian here because Jody Lynn, she's a little bit west of you. Yeah, this is good.
Fantastic. Awesome.
Marilyn, I feel like I've met you, if not in this life, definitely in a past life, but I feel like I already know you for some reason. So
yeah, I'm sure
I'm
that
excited
we
to talk to you.
Past lives. That's great. I can find that out too, by the way.
There you go.
See, that's one of those things I always ask myself, do I want to know, what I was in a past life? Like, cause, most of the time you hear a story about somebody telling their past lives and they were, Cleopatra or they were Achilles or, there was some major figure. They weren't Joe Schmo working in the farm, So do I really want to find out?
It was Joe Schmo.
Joe Schmo.
Yeah.
So anyway, Marilyn, tell us a little bit about how you got into this helping people with relationships thing.
Well, I kind of tripped into it, to be honest. I have a background in hospitality. I'm a total business practical person. I was raised with religion. I'm Catholic, cradle Catholic, and for some people, a recovering Catholic because so, and I went through a lot of clinical depression. I left a 25-year marriage in 2015, and then I just started finding things. I think it was like the law of attraction. I was starting to draw my spiritual journey in, and then realizing the experience that I had, life experience and work experience, I wanted to become a life coach. I felt that would be helpful for people. And so I took that training, and then there was just something not quite right. It was something missing. And then I found the Akashic Records, and I said, oh, okay, this is juicy. This is spicy. I like this. And so I started working with that, and then trained in how to read relationships. And then that was, the light bulbs just keep going off. So I'm like, okay, this is good stuff because, I left a 25-year marriage in 2015, and in 2020, I met a fabulous man, and
hooray!
For 3 years. And I'm 59 this year, and I'm looking forward to my 60s. I think they're going to be a blast and way better than the 40s and 30s and whatever else I was doing. But, everything I went through, it makes me who I am today. So I don't regret a single moment or choice. I just want to help people sort of smooth the path from wherever they are to their future.
Okay, so Jody Lynn, we're going to have like a fun conversation here, right? Because she taps into the Akashic Records. You're a channel. I mean, this is going to be like, the energetic conversation going on today.
I love it.
Great.
It's going to be really good. I love this. Okay, so we have had some conversations about Akashic Records. We've had some experts on telling us about them. Jody Lynn's actually shared some stuff about it. But tell us what you know. First of all, why is it so interesting and valuable? And how do you access it? And how is it something that anyone can access?
Yes. So, I mean, that's a huge conversation because there are a lot of.
Well, we do things in 5 minutes at a time. Yes.
Okay. So, my understanding and how I work with the records is that they are the intranet for the soul. So they exist in the fifth dimension between the earth plane and the spirit plane. So I am just trained to access them. And I'm not super woo-woo. I'm a little woo. I'm a little bit woo and a little bit practicality. If we could make that a song, I would do that.
Yeah.
But I really like this work that I learned is very practical. It's like I go into your record, I envision myself in a library. I actually ask questions. I use a pendulum and I say, is this showing up? Is this showing up? Is this showing up? Is this a past life experience? Is this a present life, block? And then I channel stories, and I channel past life stories, but I don't say you were in Egypt in the 1800s or 19 whatever. I say you were driving down the road and you were in a car crash. And this is what happened, and that's why that happened. Or you were in a broken home, or you were in, I make it very practical so people understand and they have context around the blocks. So when I tell them the story, they'll say, oh, I have lived that story again in this lifetime.
Wow.
And I say, well, that's the repeating pattern, right? So then we just remove that. I request the removal, but it's your free will, whether you want it removed or not, right? Most people do.
Yeah.
100% of the people that I find blocks for do want them removed. And then I give them 21 days of homework to work through and affirm the clearing, work through that subconscious mind to say, this is done and I am past that now. So in the present life blocks are even more fun because I'm able to say, okay, you were 18. What was going on when you were 18 years old? And these mostly people I had not talked to or even really know that well. I just have their information. So they can tell me something went on. It was heartbreak. It was this. I say, okay, there's something stuck there. There are some things that are stuck in that age that you're not moving past. So let's knock those out. And, people come back over time just saying, I finally let that go. I finally let that go, and it's just so affirming for me when that happens.
One question that has occurred to me in the past, and for some reason I've never asked it, is do you have any sense of what, I don't know a better way to say this. It sounds kind of crass this way, but do you have any idea what your success rate is? I mean, how often when you remove a block does it actually work?
Well, the thing is, like I say, the work is we're never done, right? We're never going to do, Jody Lynn, you could probably chime in on this. we have many lifetimes, we have many blocks, we have many things on our journey, and we're not meant to clear everything. So if I find a vow of poverty, say, Walt, in your record from a past life, you'd say, okay, I understand that. That's there. There may be another instance of that. I don't know, but it's going to ease what your soul needs to ease at the time. It's only what your soul is ready to release. So you're very much in control. And I always make that very clear to people that when you go to a healer or somebody, they're not in control of you. You are always in control of your level of healing, what you want to release, and new action that you're going to take.
Yeah, that's a key piece of it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's a challenge too, isn't it? Because someone who comes to you more often than not, I would guess, I know this would be true for me, is going to not feel totally confident about their own ability to tap in that way or to clear a block and so forth. So there's already a certain degree of lack, for lack of a better term. There's a degree of doubt and of concern and frustration about, can I really clear this thing out? So even if you're asking for permission to clear it out, you're still kind of trying to draw them into it, aren't you, to be a part of that clearing process?
Yeah, and a lot of it is the acknowledgement. And some people are, a little hesitant at first to really acknowledge and get in there and say, oh, I see how that. Because some people are like, no, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. And then I just talk a little more. We chat a little. Well, how about this? Well, how about... Oh, and then you sort of say, oh, okay. And then, or they come back to me a week later, or a month later, 6 months later and say, I get it. I get it now. So, and I think people do tend to try to, they want to keep going back and, like the regular therapy thing, which I did that. I went to lots of therapists and psychologists and it was great and it has its place, but there's something about doing some good work with someone and then letting them go and letting them live their life and make some new choices and then come back when things are getting a little rocky again, come back later on and we'll do another clearing. Like it's not so, I don't want to talk to people every week. I don't want them to rely on me, right?
Yeah. Well, that would be the risk.
I get so invested. I really do. I'm just one of those people. And please let me know how you're doing. I just want to know how you're doing. But I'm trying to kind of detach a little more and say, you know what, you're good to go, because part of it is building their confidence in that they can do this on their own, right?
I don't suppose any of this sounds familiar, Jody Lynn, does it?
Oh yeah, not at all.
Not your first rodeo.
Literally.
Yeah, right.
Right there. It's so interesting. Two things come up for me. One of the things is that a lot of times our body, our brain, the way that we've been programmed is addicted to being in that cycle or in that space or in that energy where that block is. So it's like a natural groove that we've created in a record that's so easy to go back to and almost like addicting. We go on, there's something there that it's providing for us that we're getting out of it. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, when you're helping somebody get through that kind of stuff, that goes into the success rate. If people aren't ready to let it go or not even ready to let it go, they might be so fed up with it, but they're not ready to acknowledge the parts that it played for them or what the perception of the benefit was for them to have that in their life, whether it was, a crazy notion that it keeps you safe to, I have to shield my heart or else I'm not safe, or whatever it might be. If they're not willing to see that side of it and see, oh, okay, I had this false belief that it was protecting me in some way or going to be beneficial in some way, then they're not going to make it to the other side because they keep thinking this belief of I need to protect myself or I need this. And it's so unconscious. The other thing is, I was telling you about this book that I'm reading, Your Soul Contract Decoded.
Right,
and they have this beautiful picture in there, and it's talking about karmic patterns, and it's talking about the evolution of the soul and how it's a spiral upward, and there's a straight line in the middle with karmic patterns. So these patterns you will repeat over and over and over again, different lifetimes, and throughout this said lifetime, because you're meant to deepen that learning within yourself and that connection with the other side. So I think that even when my patterns show up again, I try really hard. It's not always perfect because I'm human. But I try to acknowledge how I'm different and how this moment or this instance of this pattern showing up is different than the last time, and how much I've grown in between that last time and now, because like Marilyn said, you're never done. You're never done.
I have to ask you one other thing here, because you used an interesting phrase there, Jody Lynn, and Marilyn, I want your take on this. Sure. We often, as we're describing, karmic stuff, past lives, all that kind of thing, we often talk about what we're meant to do. And the question that always comes to my mind is, meant by whom?
Ooh, you want me to answer that?
Go for it. Yeah.
You. In my perspective, it's you. Your soul, the greater you, has decided that this was your soul's mission, if you will, overarching mission, and then soul's mission for this lifetime. And those two things can be different and often are different. So you decided before you came here what that mission will be.
Once again, I'm asking myself, what was I thinking? I use that phrase, Marilyn, all the time. What on earth was I thinking?
or my daughter says, I have made a big mistake.
Yes. I think, though, that I always say this in my head when things get messy in my life and I'm struggling to see, like, why would you choose this? Really? Like, why would you choose this? A phrase that always helps me move through that is that I'm smart. Like, my soul is obviously a lot more knowledgeable than I am. And I feel like I have a lot of wisdom in this lifetime. So that means that my soul's even wiser than I perceive myself in this moment. And I wouldn't have chosen poorly. I just know that. I wouldn't have chosen poorly. So there's got to be something like absolutely incredible on the other side of this.
Yeah. And can I chime in on the
Absolutely.
purpose? Okay, so because that's part of my work too, is uncovering your soul's personality and divine gifts. So as we are created, when we are created as a soul, we're perfect and we're loved. And then we make those choices that, they can be called negative choices, but they're just negative for our soul. They're not negative from a societal view. And I think that's where people get confused. When we go with societal right and wrong, there's a whole other set of right and wrong for our soul. So that's sort of where you get locked up in the patterns. And then I also uncovered divine gifts. So you actually have divine gifts when you were created as a soul. So I'm able to tell you what those are so that we can see if you're actually expressing those gifts, right? So, I would suggest that you both probably have the energy of communication. That's one of your gifts. You need an audience in order to unlock your abundance, right? So there are other people who say have divine order, and that means they love beautiful things and they're artists. And sometimes I'll talk to somebody and who's an accountant, and I'll say, well, where is this coming from? And they, I wanted to be a designer, or I wanted to, and I just didn't do it. And I said, okay, so how can you now incorporate that a little bit when you're not working, you don't want to quit your job and go back to school if that's not practical, but can you take a course? Can you, do something on the side just to express that gift and try it out. And I think I've really helped people to sort of reframe what their gifts are, because there's a lot of stress out there, right? And that's a whole other topic, but just people they're unhappy and they don't know why. And it's part of it is you're not really living what you're meant to do. You might be super successful, but you might just be kind of unhappy. And that's, I don't like that. I don't want that.
And I love the idea. I love the idea of trying things. Okay, you don't have to make a full career out of it, but you can turn it into a side gig. You can just turn it into a side hobby. I mean, it doesn't really make any difference, but you can try something.
And you're going to know pretty quick if that's a line for you, because it's going to take off in some way. It's going to turn into something. I talked to someone a few weeks ago who started a podcast, and he's like, it just took off. He didn't mean for it. It was just a little venting thing, and it's going crazy. And I said, it's because that's what you're meant to do. You didn't realize. And he's like, oh, okay. Because he was in broadcasting and he left that and was doing something else, and he's come back around. And it's like, okay, so I can tell you why. I'm like, so it's really cool.
So on the question of meant to do, did you agree with what Jody Lynn was saying, that it's meant to do by your own inner soul, so to speak?
Yeah, when your soul was created, you decided what your gifts were going to be. And those gifts my understanding is those gifts come with you into every lifetime. So you're sort of learning each time you come, am I going to express my gifts in this lifetime? How am I going to do that? Because there's lots of different ways, right, that you can interpret your gifts. So absolutely. And a lot of, like when Jody Lynn's saying, when things are getting rough and you're trying to figure something out, and that your higher self is there with you, that you have universal love and support, sometimes you need to let go and surrender something. And I've done that. I've had total writer's block, and I'm trying to put something together. I'm like, okay, just go meditate, go take a shower, go take a walk. And then suddenly something will just click. And I was like, I was, because I was pushing a boulder up a hill. I wasn't going downstream, like with Abraham. I wasn't floating along. I was pushing and I was rolling, and it wasn't working.
Yeah, we're really good at that with really bad results.
Mm-hmm. Nothing is wasted, Walt. Nothing is wasted.
Right.
But I think that's really fed into our society, or bred into our society, of like, go, if you want to be successful, if it's meant to be, it's up to you. And, you take
work
that out
hard.
of the,
you can only make money if you work hard.
Exactly.
Work hard. Yeah. No, I don't.
You gotta
I
do
don't
something
to that at all. Nope.
Well, I proved that it was wrong, actually. I proved it with my own life. The harder I worked, the poorer I became.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I totally defined myself by my job, my first big job. I worked in a big hotel, and I was a workaholic. And I got pregnant, and then I left, and then I didn't have that job anymore. I was a mom, but I transitioned so quickly because she was a month early that my mind didn't flip properly. So by 3 months, I was in a hole. I was in a depression hole because I defined myself by that job. So I didn't know who I was after that. And that so many people do that. They define themselves by something outside of themselves. And that's really, I was really thankful that I made some journey before COVID hit, because I lost my job again because I was in hospitality. I chose the industry that got killed. But anyway, but I was okay. Mentally, mindset, I was fine. I was like, you know what? We're going to make it through this. I have my meditation practice. I have yoga. I have my family. I'm okay, and it was, I'm grateful for that.
That's fabulous. I love that. I also love something else that Jody Lynn mentioned a moment ago. She talked about how her soul wouldn't make a decision that wasn't right for her. And it really caught my attention when she said that. So I kind of took that to the next level and asked myself, well, if I am frequently replaying things that aren't doing me a good deed, they aren't helping me, clearly I'm not trusting, I'm not believing in that part of me that is making the decision to get there. And yet, as I look at conversations we've had here on the podcast, people talking about, the traumas they've experienced and how they came through at the other end, and things got better, and it got so much better that they said, wow, I got this new discovery. I got to share it with the world. It's amazing how often those things that are so troubling, that are so frustrating, that we don't really trust ourselves on. But as Jody Lynn said, our higher self or our inner being or whatever you want to call it wouldn't lead us down the wrong path. It turns out it didn't, because we ended up producing results out of this horrible situation that blew our minds. But we could only see that, like 30 years afterward or whatever. It's amazing how often that plays out.
You don't always get the answer, right? You don't always know the reason.
Which tells me I half the time don't even know the question.
Well, and I think sometimes your soul's gonna make you or persuade you to make a choice that maybe you won't need to learn something from. So, because I've certainly made some choices that I'm like, oh boy, what did I do that for? And then looking back, I'm like, well, those were all parts of the puzzle. They were all what led me here. So I was supposed to go off the path because I needed to learn something over there, and then I need to learn something over here, and then I got back on the path, right? Like as long as you're always moving forward towards something, and that something doesn't have to be the ultimate manifestation or the ultimate goal. For me, it's just, who are you becoming as you grow and expand? As long as you're growing, as long as you're expanding and, opening yourself up, I think that's our purpose, really, is to live that.
Yeah, I think so. Of course, no, that doesn't mean it's easy. I mean, as you're waiting for that path to play out and you're waiting for that result, the anxiety's there. I mean, it's not like the anxiety went away all this time. The anxiety's going to go away and I'm going to find out what the answer is. No, it's not the way it works. So you're dealing with all this crap while you're trying to get to that other side.
But how much of it is like self-inflicted?
Like 100% perhaps? I mean,
yeah, exactly. Right? If we stop thinking about it in terms of good or bad, or like this is a negative thing, or I'm bad, or whatever meanings we're assigning to it, maybe we could have some solace in the meantime.
Yeah.
So you try to figure it out. You try to like, okay, this sucks. What is this about? Why am I doing this? Because we're manifesting all the time. So if you start miring around in that muck, you're going to get more muck. So if you kind of try to figure it out and say, okay, this is happening because of this, and that, and if I just do this, or I'm going to pivot here, or I'm going to just say, you know what, whatever lesson I need to learn, please bring it on, because I'm ready to move forward. So I think that's kind of how I see it. And I actually find great solace in knowing that I could be coming back again. So I want to work on myself as much as I can so that the next time around, I'm going to maybe do a little bit better. So
Okay. You mentioned a good word there too, pivot, because pivot is one of the key tools that we have available to us to make that shift away from those anxious, frustrated, disappointed, angry, pissed off mindsets that we find ourselves in. And I know from my own personal experience with them. In fact, I was just journaling something about that just before we did the show here. Very often, if I can sit down and either meditate or journal or something on something that I'm dealing with and try to find that pivot point, I'll identify the pivot point and I'll try to feel it, do all the things you're supposed to do. But there's a piece of me that's just kind of taking it on blind faith that this pivot point is actually going to produce something good because I'm not necessarily totally feeling it. I mean, I try to convince myself that I am. I try to convince myself, okay, this is a good pivot. I can see it's got a positive curve to it. Yeah, that's going to work out good. But do I really, really feel it? No, not really. It's like, I hope this works.
Well, and it's okay to have those feelings, like those emotions and that rage and anger and, get it out because if it stays in there, that's going to create stress and, ultimately manifest perhaps in your physical body. So you do want to, but you limit your time. You take that time and get that rage out and get that stuff out. But that's brilliant, Walt, that you're doing that. To take that a bit further is to write all that down and then sleep on it and ask your higher self, hey, you know what? Give me a sign. Let me know if this is the right way to go. And if it isn't, stop me. Do something that just stops me. Right? Because you don't want to go down a long path and into the weeds and down the river and over the rocks.
Last week, I was like, God, give me a sign. I want to see 1111 or something like that, 111. I had to do with ones. And then I'm sitting there thinking, I'm in the middle of a farmer's field and I am deconstructing a grain bin. Where am I ever going to see
the digits?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is impossible. I'm not gonna see anything, whatever. Okay, I'm still open. If this is the direction you want me to take, just, let me know everything's going to be okay. I want to see 11:11 before I close my eyes and I go to sleep. And then we went over to my parents' place. My mom made us dinner because my dad came to help us deconstruct this grain bin. And it was 7:00 at night. And my mom's like, oh, the chug wagon races are on. And we're a big rodeo family and whatever. So Nate's like, we got to watch. And so everybody sits down. Out of the top 10 scores, the top 8 were 11:11 point something. I was like,
there you go.
I see you. I hear you. I got it. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Isn't that cool? And you acknowledge those and you get more of them. Because once I started learning about those angel numbers and all that stuff, 711 and 555 and 444, I'm seeing them all the time now. And I always say, oh, hey, thanks. Thanks. If I'm feeling a little down, I'll see a number and go, okay, thanks. I needed that. Yeah. So, yeah, it's very cool. And I see my dad's name. He passed quite suddenly and towards the end of 2021, and his name is Leo, and he's coming up all the time. And even if I'll have a reading with someone, I'll mention his name, and they'll say, oh, "That's why I keep getting that name in my head." He's very strong energy, and that's part of what I love about my spiritual journey too. Is that my parents are both departed, but they're still with me, and I love that because I think 20 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that like I do now. Right. And that's just very comforting. I think it's very comforting for a lot of people.
Interesting point. Because my parents are departed as well. And I think I do believe that. I can't honestly say though that I am regularly cognizant of it. Quite the opposite, actually. I'm normally not cognizant of it. But the funny thing is, it doesn't seem to stop them.
They're talking to you.
I may not be listening, but yeah, they're babbling away. And the only way I can say that I really feel like I know that is it isn't so much, I don't really get verbal messages. I don't get word messages. I mainly just get a feeling. And that's really a feeling of just ongoing support. It's that kind of a feeling. And it's very consistent. Yeah.
Not nice.
Yeah.
That's so
it is nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how we got there, but anyway. a great conversation. I love it because it's like it's all around.
I've often thought we should rename the show, Rabbit Hole Central. Because that's what we do, right, Jody Lynn? I mean, seriously, we're constantly digging rabbit holes. It's not even just going down them; we're creating them as we go.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But it makes it fun. It makes it a whole lot.
It's amazing.
So let's get back to the relationship topic, because that's the one that you focus on the most, and it's what you came through yourself. You're another example, by the way, of what I was talking about earlier. You go through something, you find something at the other end, you say, wow, I got to share this with the world, and that's what you're doing. You're sharing with the world what you learned. But when you think back to your own experience of finding your mate after the end of your marriage, what was your experience like in terms of how you felt about it and thought about it on a day-to-day basis? Because my guess is, like most of us, it wasn't like, oh, I'm always in that high vibe space and I'm doing all the things to attract the person and so forth. You're going through the ups and downs. That's part of the way that life goes. So tell us a little bit about what that was like for you.
Oh, yeah. Very interesting. So the marriage ended, and actually the marriage had ended for both of us, I think, long before we physically separated. So a lot of people were telling me, oh, you're going to be depressed. You're going to be so down. You're going to be grieving. And I'm like, you know what? I've been doing that for at least 5, maybe 10 years now. So I think I'm going to be okay. And I think both of us were happier on the other side of that. But living alone was so amazing for me. Like, I'd never lived alone. And I was 52, and it could have been very scary, but it was actually very freeing. It was the first time coming from my parents' house to my husband's house to then living alone, being able to make my own decisions and finding out how does Marilyn like to fold towels? What does Marilyn want to have for dinner? Like just silly stuff. Marilyn can take her own garbage out. Oh my God. Like it was cool. So, for the first 2 years, I was like, no, I am not interested in a relationship. I don't, I'm happy with my dog. I might get some cats. I don't know. But, and then, a friend convinced me to go online because, in my heart of hearts, I have a lot of love to give and I like being in partnership. And I really felt like I could do it better if I found the right person. So I went online and, like I said, I get invested. So I go on one date and I'm all in, and it's just so scary for people. Like this, and I got rejected many times, and I would say, oh my God. And, and people would say to me, it's one date. You went for a drink. You're not getting married. What is going on? And I said, I don't know. I'm so emotionally into it, so I learned to pull back, and I learned to actually had sort of I joke with her that she was my online dating coach, because she said, just learn something, even if it's a nice new wine that you like, or learn something about somebody in that interaction. Like, don't walk away thinking that this is going to be like the be all end all, your soulmate kind of thing. It's just a date. And then I started to relax a bit, and, a lot of different things happened, and I kind of just let it go for a while. And I just needed a break again. I wanted to go through that process, and I'm glad that I did, because it was important for me. I hadn't dated much before I got married, and there was no online dating when in the 80s, or, so it was just something that I needed to try. So I did spend a lot of time trying. And then once I finally sort of detached, I started doing more work on myself and clearing some blocks and really understanding what kind of relationship I wanted. I write it down, and this is the kind of person that I want to be with. And this is the kind of relationship that I want to have. And this is how I want my life to look like in the next few years. And, and it sort of happened. And then I kind of jumped back online and said, oh, okay, I'll try it again. And then that was it. It was when I completely detached, I surrendered, and I said, this is what I would like. If it's meant for me, bring it on.
I can totally relate to the detached thing. I mean, totally relate to it. That's how I met my first wife, actually, because literally, yeah, I mean, she just, up until that point, my dating life had been an absolute train wreck, absolute, complete, total train wreck. And there were a number of reasons for that. But I threw in the towel. I said, I can't take this anymore. I'm done. I'll be a bachelor for the rest of my life. It's not worth all this pain that I've been going through. And a month later, I got introduced to my soon-to-be wife. I mean, just because I kind of let go backward. It's not like I was knowing what I was doing. It was more like, I can't take this anymore.
Well, in a way, you were surrendering. You just didn't know it at the time.
Exactly. Precisely. That's precisely what happened. In fact, we were actually introduced by a mutual friend, and the mutual friend, when she called me up, she says, I've got a friend who would like to meet you. Can I give you her number? I said, no, I quit.
But did the friend keep bringing it up and bringing it up? Like, was it kind of one of these?
Well, the friend is a psychotherapist, and so she knew how to talk me through it.
Because they always say, you know, what's meant for you won't pass you by, which I actually like that terminology, because sometimes I'll be thinking I need to go for something and then I hesitate and then I'm not sure. And then I'll say, oh, it will come around again. If it's meant for me, it will hit me again in another way, or I'll hear it again, or I'll get that nudge. So I really love that. And I do share that with a lot of people, and it brings them a lot of relief, because they're like, oh, I missed that opportunity. Oh, it'll never come around again. I said, you know what? It wasn't meant for you. If it didn't happen, it wasn't meant. Just relax.
Well, and an add on to that is that what is coming, maybe it wasn't meant for you. And what is coming is even better than you could ever imagine, or whatever that opportunity was in your mind. If that wasn't meant for you, like, I don't know why as humans we think that we would have picked shitty lives. Like, really? Would we have like, oh yeah, I'm going to pick pain, anguish, heartache, no good stuff. Like, I know that this is the land of contrast. This is the third dimension, but I don't think a soul would be like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I think that there's the contrast of both. Like, yeah, we wouldn't have chosen that poorly, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I'd like to think not. Yeah, for sure.
Well, this actually ties into the conversation we had yesterday, because we were talking in the show yesterday with Joel Elston. We were talking about the whole idea that we create everything in our lives, which is a challenging idea, especially for somebody who's been through severe trauma. Especially if they were like a little kid, they had no feeling of control over any of it, and they had all this terrible stuff imposed upon them and all that kind of thing. How could that possibly be something that you created? And for me, actually, the harder one for me is somebody who goes through an entire lifetime with the same challenge over and over again, and they never seemingly get past it. Like, why would you choose to do that? That to me is actually harder to believe. For most people, it's the other one that's harder to believe, but that's the one that's harder for me to believe. Like, why would you even bother? Like, let's just torture myself for 70 or 80 years. I mean, that's what.
And then let's do it again.
And then do it again. Yeah.
But like Jody Lynn was saying about that comfort zone, even though it's painful, it's comfortable. It's what you know. So if you're stuck in a trauma and you step out of that, that's uncomfortable, even though it might be better. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it's better over here. And they're like, no, it's uncomfortable, because they're so used to. And that's like people that continually get into relationships that are abusive, because it's just that they have trained themselves. That's how they wish to be treated. That's how they understand they're supposed to be treated. They've learned a different way. So that's why it's important to break those patterns. And that's why I think people just get locked into them. And it's hard to watch, because you can see it happening to other people, but they don't always see it in themselves and what's happening. Right.
And speaking of that comfort zone, the other piece of that is really just kind of mind boggling to me is that, well, first of all, the comfort zone is almost never comfortable. I mean, it's kind of misnamed because there's nothing comfortable about it, but it seems, by comparison, when you're in it, it seems better than the alternative. So that's why it feels relatively comfortable. And the uncomfortable is to climb out of it. The really odd part about that is when we climb out of that comfort zone, we do it because on some level we recognize a primary fact, and that is we are the common denominator of our own lives. Yeah. How interesting that identifying that fact is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, I think it comes with like blame. Like,
because you don't want to take responsibility, right? Like, you don't want to take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
You don't want to say, oh, I created that. Oh, I knocked a dish off the shelf the other day and I went, Okay, yeah, I did. I was thinking bad thoughts, and Wayne Dyer was like, just think about what you're thinking about when you trip on something, or you fall, or you break something, or you're okay. Yeah, my head wasn't. I know, I did that. And you just say thank you, thank you for that.
Well, you let yourself off the hook too. I mean, that's what you were doing there. Really, you were letting yourself off the hook.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was accepting that. Yeah, I was accepting responsibility. Yeah, I was thinking that, and and I got beamed. So there we go.
But you could have beat yourself up about it. Is my point.
Of course, yes, of course, yeah, true. And I do when I work with people in terms of soul's personality. Like some people are, are a little bit aimless, and that's kind of their soul's vibe. They don't have like a clear purpose, and they can tend to make other people create a purpose for them. And sometimes it's a huge relief to people to understand, oh, okay, now I understand why I do that and why I attract codependency and relationships. Okay, so how do I manage that? And then that's kind of the coaching piece, or that's the right. Where you sort of work through those things, or pull up the gifts. Here's your gifts. Why don't you start refocusing on your own gifts instead of, being in relationships all the time? Because that's the cyclical relationship people that keep going from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to fulfill their lives with whatever is missing. So you need to kind of figure out what's missing, and you take responsibility for that. And then a relationship will come to you with another whole person, right? That's done their own work.
Exactly true. Exactly true. And I can think of a few things to say off of that, but I'm going to go with one that I was already thinking about. Okay. I was thinking because you used the word gifts, and Jody Lynn earlier talked about a payoff, and I realized that when Jody Lynn was talking about, she was talking about it in terms of something that it's like that comfort zone thing, and we're stuck on something. Whereas you were talking, Marilyn, when you said a gift about something that is something that benefits you, that actually helps you get into a better place, and that made me realize gifts and payoffs sound very similar, but that they're really kind of opposite, aren't they?
Well, I would say the gift. I think if you're expressing the gift, then you get the payoff. Does that?
Okay. Well, I guess the payoff, as I was referring to earlier, the one that I heard Jody Lynn talking about is like if you're repeating a self-destructive behavior, there's always a payoff associated with it. Otherwise, you wouldn't continue the behavior. But it's not necessarily a healthy payoff, is what I'm pointing to.
No, true. And sometimes you're not in enough pain to make a change.
Right. So I was distinguishing between, I guess I should call it the unhealthy payoff and the gift.
Okay. Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. You're absolutely right. They're different.
And they are different. And the reason I bring that out is they can seem similar. Mm-hmm. It really is going to come down to how connected you are with yourself in order to be able to distinguish the difference between the two.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So when somebody's not in a good place, that can be a source of confusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we go kind of get muddled up sometimes, and and it's kind of, you just need to untangle everything, and we try to just go back. Like that's what my work does, and a lot of people do. We're trying to get back to where we were. We're trying to reset sometimes, mm-hmm. right? At any point in our life, whether you're 25 or 35 or 65, you kind of just want to factory reset sometimes. Say, can I start this again? Can I go back and start it again? And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I reinvented myself over my many years trying to fix what it was at the mm-hmm. source. I couldn't figure out what it was. Changed jobs, moved, did this, did that, like in it, but it's right. You try new things. You keep going. You don't give up. Like so many people in our age group are like, oh, well, I'm miserable, but I'll just
my life is over.
I know. Yeah. And they're like, and they're younger than me. And I'm like, excuse me?
You know what? My birthday was on Monday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I was doing a little bit of reflecting, and I was like, man, if I could talk to my younger self, I would say every year on your birthday, you should write down like what's going on in your life so that you can remember. Because now I'm sitting here and I'm like, what happened when I was 28? And I don't quite remember exactly, but one of the things that I remember that is so weird was as soon as I turned 28, I had this biological clock that was ticking in my head, tick, 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 tick. And this feeling of overwhelm. If I don't have children, right now, I am going to die. I'm never going to have them. My time is running out. All of these things, it's over. And I was 28. And fast forward a decade later, I'm 38 now and I don't have any children yet. We're still practicing, working on it. But I don't hear that clock ticking in my head, and I don't feel that same pressure. And it's a decade later. So interesting, the mind games that we play on ourselves, really.
Well, and that's society too, right? Saying
Definitely.
that you have to do this and you have to do that. And I mean, I look at what I did. I mean, dating, you date, you get married, you get a house, you have a kid. I mean, I did it all. I did all that I was supposed to do and had a big job. And, and now the kids are my daughter lives in South Korea. She's just having the time of her life. She's 27 and she's never had a relationship. Don't care. It's great. I'm having fun. I said, oh my God, if I can't even imagine doing that in my day. It was you had to do all these things. And yeah, no, I think it's brilliant. I think it's going to get even better in the next generation.
Well, it always does. I mean, that's the way generations work. One generation comes along, and the next one exceeds it, and the next one exceeds that, and the next one exceeds that.
I think we did kind of a pretty big leap between our parents and us, but I think it was a mammoth, big jump in this next generation. Wow, It's been a big, huge change. So
yeah. I look back to my parents and their generation and the generation before that. My parents grew up in the Great Depression. And, I can't even begin to imagine what that was like other than what I've read about it and what little I could get them to tell me about it. But they both my mom and my dad grew up in the depths of the Depression. They were both in families that were hit hard by it. For instance, my dad would often tell the story about how every Sunday the local firemen would bring dinner by because they couldn't afford always to have dinner. I mean, it was that kind of a thing. So, it was pretty rough. And I think about that in terms of the modern world that we live in. And that's, I mean, in first world anyway, I mean, it's certainly going to be true in third world, but in first world, that's almost inconceivable.
Yeah.
It's not totally inconceivable. There are people in first world who still have those kinds of situations going on, but it's not a pandemic of it, to borrow a word that we just went through. It's not all over the place. It's not everywhere.
No.
The shift the shifts, it's more than one. The many shifts that have happened during that time are really rather astonishing.
Yeah. Yeah. The creation that has happened and just the acknowledgement of the abundance in the world it is astounding. It's great.
And there's more to be done. I mean, it's not like it's not like the journey ends. it goes on forever, it just keeps going and going and going. But wow, it really is amazing when you take a look at it. Now, you can look at it the other way too. Actually, there's large segments of the population right now that are seeing what's going on, and they're only seeing it in terms of a negative trend going on. We were talking about that yesterday as well. All they can see is, the world is falling apart. Oh my God, we're in end times. It's all this other crazy stuff. You can see it that way. It's really, you really could if you wanted to. I personally have no interest in it, but you really could look at things that way.
Yeah, you can get dragged right down into it, and you can, but what is it they say? You can't be miserable enough to make the world happy. You can't keep pulling yourself down into that stuff. That's not helpful. If everybody just lifts themselves up, because I talk to people, I work with clients who say, my husband or my spouse or this won't come along the ride, and it's dragging me down. I said, no, work on yourself. And that person will come or not come. It's okay. But, if we all just keep lifting, and shining a light, it's going to eventually raise consciousness. We're going to raise that vibration.
That
And when
phrase.
you go within,
Oh, so go ahead, Joel.
sorry,
Go ahead.
well,
No,
I
go.
was just going to say, when you go within, you change the external world, your current reality. The most powerful example I have in my own life is my relationship with my mom. Like, we butted heads. She was mean to me, and all the things brought me down, couldn't stand her. All of the things were more alike than I actually realized. But when I started to do the work on me, and I started to forgive her and let go of some of those things, and the more that I worked on me, the more she changed, and our relationship changed. And now we're friends. Like, I live down the road from her and my dad, and we're like good friends, and we hang out all of the time. Sometimes she still irritates me, but she doesn't pick on me, and she's not mean to me the way that she used to be back in the day.
Isn't it interesting how that works?
I love that.
I mean, that does play out often, but isn't it interesting how that works? Because you worked on yourself and it actually affected her.
Absolutely. The vibration was completely different. Everybody asks me all the time, well, what did she do? Like, did you talk to her about any of this stuff? No, I didn't tell her I was, doing radical forgiveness worksheets in my bed at midnight times 1,000 on her. No, she doesn't know that unless she's listening right now.
Hi, Mom.
I did. Hi, Mom. Yeah, exactly.
You changed your perception of her, like you and I've listened to you. I know you guys talk about Abraham Hicks, and I've listened to things that say if you're struggling in a relationship, focus on the positive parts of that. Anything you can find, and that you'll start to see that come back, like that, more of that will come to you. So it's very cool. I think that's brilliant, Jody Lynn, because we're, it's really important. Our parents are a relationship that we need, that impacts future relationships for us. So we have to heal some of that stuff, because we don't want to make that generational, right? We want to kind of get to the root of it and clear it out. And that's part of,
Mm-hmm. And, well, this is a good one for you. We chose our parents too.
Oh my God! No.
So we wouldn't have chosen poorly, right? We would have chosen to learn something, experience something, I don't know, for the greater good.
There are some people who have been through some really rough stuff with some really rough parents, and who are going to have trouble with that. I'm sure there will be, but I tend to agree. I mean, it's one of those things that's uncomfortable, but I kind of have to agree with it.
It really does turn it on its head, though, when you tell somebody you chose your parents, you chose your family. So why do you think you did that?
Yeah.
And then you start to deconstruct it and go, oh, like it's just a different perception, and it might help you to understand more about your journey and why you're in that situation and what your soul is meant to do, right? It's all encompassing. It all works. It all fits.
I referenced Joel Elston, who does the Tuesday shows with me, and one of the things he loves to talk about is exactly this, because he talked about having gone through hell. He's gone through hell and back. I mean, there's just so many things in his life that has just been horrible. And he says he values every one of them. Not that he wants to live them again. He doesn't want to live any of them again, but they are the best things that ever happened to him. He actually uses that phrase. They're the best things that could possibly have happened. And he really believes it deep down because of what they led him to.
Right. I mean, the empathy that I developed going through clinical depression, I can't tell you how it plays out from, like, how important that is for me, that I understand when people say they've been through it. And I say, I have too. I understand what that's like. And it's hard. It was hard for me to find people that understood, even in the medical profession. So I found friends, and I found people who had been through it and understood, because it is a hard one. And, but again,
all the gifts.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't great. I don't recommend it. I don't want to go through it again, but I do appreciate why it all happened. So.
Yes, it really is amazing how often that theme plays out here on the show, especially over and over and over and over. And after a while, you begin to notice. I mean, it's so prevalent.
Because I talked about that, about, you're on a spiritual journey, and a lot of people feel like they need to get broken before they discover a spiritual journey. And it's like, maybe you want to try and just, ride the wave while you're doing okay, start to, expand yourself in that good space so you don't fall down the well. I mean, Joe Dispenza talks about that too, right? He's like, you can wait till you're, at death's door before you actually make some changes.
Sure.
Or you can start, taking care of yourself and your health and your body and your mind, get ahead of it, right? You just want to get ahead of it a little bit.
And that's actually a journey in itself and an adventure as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've been discovering, because that's been a big deal. Well, particularly since the divorce, because with the divorce, everything, goes, when you have that kind of a major change, it's like everything in life is thrown up in the air and it's all out of whack and so forth. And now you're trying to piece it all back together again, which I have largely been doing successfully. But in the process of doing that, you kind of realize it's just, it's crazy. It's at times unbalanced. At times it's, pull your hair out and it all irons out.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, that whole surrender piece is good there too. And I know, I think even Wayne Dyer talked about his first, his first divorce was a little bit acrimonious until he finally said, I'm going to bring peace to this situation. Mm-hmm. And he just said, and he just kept reflecting on that and affirming that. And it ended up going more smoothly, because if you shoot those daggers, it gets worse. And it's hard to see it from the outside. But if you just say, I was fortunate in my separation, we were still sort of friends, and, we just worked things out. And I really am grateful for that, because it didn't get to, because I have friends that have been 2 years into, kind of just a slow burn of a battle with, lawyers and all the rest of it. And I feel sad about that, because I don't think all of that is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably another journey.
It is.
Once again, pissing off a whole range of the audience.
Did you choose that?
I didn't personally, no. Mine was a little bit of mine was sort of like halfway between what you were talking about, because ours was fairly convivial and relatively quick, but it was also it wasn't the kind of slow burn leading up to like you described. It may have been for her, but it wasn't for me. For me, it was a shock, because I didn't even know it was going to happen until it happened. So it was a kind of a different dynamic from that perspective.
Right.
But that just goes, everybody's journey is different. Everybody's journey. Everybody.
Yeah. And that's when people say, well, how did you do it? Or how did you get out of depression? Or how did you, and it was like, there are 100 things I did. I can't tell you which one actually flipped the switch or helped. Yeah. They all help. Everything helps. And when people come to me and say, I've tried all these things and nothing worked, I said, nothing is wasted. It all is working. It may be working behind the scenes, and you just haven't flip the switch yet. So keep going, keep trying, keep going. Don't stop.
Or even more crazy, you may have already flipped the switch. You just haven't seen the result yet.
Right. And a manifesting book I was reading was so cool. It said, a raindrop indicates that rain is coming. So when your manifestation is the rain, when you see a raindrop, so you see one tiny little thing happens that's positive, you go, oh, thanks for the raindrop. I know the rain is coming. So you just keep saying, it's coming.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I love it.
I love this conversation. The sad part, it's almost over, but we got to do a couple things before we finish up here. First of all, you have a program, Finding Love Again. Tell us about this. How do people, find out? How do people find Finding Love Again?
Well, my website is lifeguidecoaching.ca for Canada, and I have a relationship guide that I put together. So it's helping people to just to journal and to go through some questions. And like a couple of the topics are, need versus want. Do we need a relationship or do we want a relationship? And sort of understanding the difference between those two. Different person, same relationship, like we've talked about, those repeating patterns, and just be the person you want to attract. So sort of trying to take people through a journaling of how to do that. And then they can come and talk to me, and we can do a relationship reading that uncovers those blocks for them and releases them. So that's taking a step. And then they need to take the action too. So you need to say, okay, what are you doing? if it's not working for you and you're in a space now that you want a relationship, then let's see if we can do some different actions. Do something different. And if you're fatigued, if you have dating fatigue, change something else in your life. What else would you like to do? Is there a hobby you want to do? Is there a job change you want to make? Maybe that's your priority right now, right? So I'm just sort of trying to guide people through how to find love again, even if it's just love for themselves, right? So that's
where it all starts anyway. So it really makes sense to go through. Yeah.
Right. So I have, whole soul realignment reading, which I take you through, which uncovers all your general blocks. And then we can go into relationships. I can clear your space. If you've lived with someone in your space for a long time and that's no longer, there's lots of energy that's sitting there stuck. And I can clear that out too. So it's really cool work. And there's so many angles that I can work with it. I just sort of thought this finding love again is really neat and it's very close to my heart. So I kind of sort of start with that, and then I can work with people in any way they would like.
So is finding the Finding Love Again program, is that the best way to reach you?
Yes, just lifeguidecoaching.ca. And if you want to get the free guide, it's lifeguidecoaching.ca/relationships. Mm-hmm. And then I'm on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook at Lifeguide Coaching is how to get me.
Okay. All right, good. So yeah, anybody who, because there very well could be somebody who's tuned in saying, wow, there's something about her vibe, something that she's saying that's resonating. I gotta follow up. So yeah, now we, and I'll make sure we include a link to the website too in the show notes so they can find it easily. Make it really simple.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much.
One other thing I got to tell you before you go, and Jody Lynn knows I do this all the time, but I noticed this about a year ago, actually a little over a year ago. I noticed that as a society, as a world society, global society, we tend to skip a very important thing. That thing that we skip is we now live in an age where we're constantly putting out content. And those of us who are givers, you're a giver, those who are givers are putting out all kinds of content, trying to help people and reach people to be clients and so forth. And in the process, we help a lot of people we never meet, we never see, and we never see the result of it. And we kind of skip that like it doesn't count. And I said to myself, that doesn't make any sense. All these people being helped by content from somebody that they've never met and that they'll never meet and the other person will never meet. We shouldn't recognize it. We shouldn't appreciate it. That doesn't make any sense. So on behalf of all those people you've never met and you've never seen, thanks for all that content you've been putting out, because you are making a difference in this world.
Well, thank you. And the same to both of you. This is a fabulous podcast. I love it. I've been listening and I will listen more and I will tell everyone. I shared all the links for tonight. So I hope a lot of people tuned in.
Fabulous. You just helped us create another daily dose of happy.
Yay. Perfect.
Jody Lynn, I always come to you at the end. What's the one thing that jumps out more than anything else?
It was all meant to be. And I'm going to take right from Marilyn. Never stop. Just keep going. And I think that's such a beautiful message. So thank you for that message and that reminder here today, Marilyn.
Great. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing all this great stuff. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
We did too. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.